So, you want dynamite darts content? Well, Alex Moss and Burton DeWitt have you covered. Love these guys. For bullseyes, bounce-outs, and darting brilliance, keep it right here. You are listening to the weekly Dartscast. Now, I'm Canadian and often get asked how Canadians call out a maximum, a 180? Well, it sounds something like this. 100, eh? T.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast in association with Darts Corner. I'm Alex Moss and I called it last week. I said that he'd regain the Darts Strava King title from me. Here he is, my co-host, the Darts statistician, Burton DeWitt. How are you doing?
Well, you'll have to ask again in about half an hour. Right now, doing well, but we'll see if Middlesbrough hold on away to Norwich. How are you, Alex?
I'm doing okay, thank you. Away from this, made my long-awaited debut in the Astley Bridge Darts League here in Bolton last week. Managed to get a win as well, so I was quite pleased with that. Hopefully there's going to be more to come, although I am half tempted to retire on that one win and say that I've always been unbeaten in the league. But aside from that, we've got another busy show for you guys this week. Two great guests calling in. We're going to be previewing the European Championship in a few moments, and you're also going to hear from the defending champion of that event. Ross Smith calls in a little bit later on. Plus, you're going to hear from the author James Walton, who joins us to talk about his new book. It's a story all about darts, Every Neet a week. Stay tuned for that as well. But before then, the next PDC major event on the calendar is almost here. The European Championship gets underway in Dortmund on Thursday night. A stacked 32-player field. Over half the field have won a PDC major title before, so it's a tough event to predict. But looking at the draw, which of the four quarters do you think is the hardest to call?
Well, just last week we tried to pick a match out of each of the quarters that we were most looking forward to. And even at that time, I was saying like there's some quarters where I want to watch every match. And even in the quarters that I didn't pick every match, I still wanted to watch every match. Because this is, we say this every tournament at this point, it's, possibly the best field ever because of how deep darts has become. But it also just has so many really good matchups. You look at that top quarter. Dave Chisnell, 3 Euro Tour titles this year, 4 going back to the last event of last season, going against Chris Doby, who has really emerged this season. It's weird saying that someone who had 3 previous major semifinals has emerged this year. But I think this year has been his emergence year. He won his first major title. He's made it to the money end of the 2 big ranking events on Sky, the World Match Play and the World Grand Prix, making it to the quarterfinals of both and playing some really good stuff. And he's the last person into the field. You also look the world champion going against Raymond van Barneveld, who looks like he's still improving again and getting back. I mean, not where he was when he was a 5-time world champion, but much better than he was when he retired. And I think he still has a couple more gears that he can find. He's improving. Peter Wright is coming into gear, and that's the top quarter. And in many ways, it might be the weakest of the 4 quarters. I don't think it is, but I think you can make that argument because of just how stacked this field is. But the question isn't what's the weakest. It isn't even what's the second strongest. It is which of the 4 is the toughest quarter, in my opinion. And I'm going to have to go for the third quarter. Starting with the highest seed there, Luke Humphreys. Yeah, he only won 1 Euro Tour this year, but he made the final of a further 5. He made the semifinals of the last event, where if he'd won it, he would have moved into the top overall seed. Heading back to last year, he's made the final or won in 10 of the last 20 Euro Tour events that he's played in. 10 of the last 21. It was 10 of the 20 before the German Darts Championships. Now it's 10 of the last 21 that he's played in and won half those finals. He's been just a force. And what did he do the last time he played on a major stage? He lifted the title. He took out 138, the best and biggest 138 ever to win a major title, to win the World Grand Prix in Leicester. He is playing the darts of his life, and I still think he can improve from here. He can still become more consistent. He can still play at his best more often. And now that he has a major under his belt, he's won all these Euro Tours and now playing in the European Championships, which is the tour championship for the tour he's dominated. It's just an opportunity. But look at that quarter. I won't even mention Brendan Dolan, who he's playing. Well, I guess I'm going to mention him because I just did. But other than that, I wouldn't have mentioned him, but for the fact that he beat Michael van Gerwen in the World Match Play this year. Next 2 names, Christopher Teichler. He won on the Euro Tour this year. Joe Cullen Yeah, I think Joe Cullen is as good as he's ever been. He didn't win a Euro Tour this year. It's actually the first time he hasn't won a Euro Tour other than the two-event 2021 season since 2018, but he made a pair of semifinals. He's also made the semifinals of both of the Sky Majors this year. He looks like a player that is on the precipice of another major breakthrough. If he can get past Christoph Ratajski and then past either Luke Humphries or Brendan Dolan. Dirk van Dijvenbode, 2 Euro Tour finals this year. He's also, now that Luke Humphries has won a title, probably the best player who hasn't won a major yet. James Wade. Wade's out of the top 16. I was going to say for the first time in 17 years, but it's actually the second time in 17 years because he dropped out of the top 16 a week ago, got back into it for 2 days, and then dropped out of it again when Ross Smith won the last Players' Championship. And we'll come on to that later. But James Wade, we only know as a 10-time major champion. Johnny Clayton won a Euro Tour this year. And Jose de Sousa, I still think he's moving in the right direction. He's not had a good Euro Tour season this year. He's not been good on the television, but he's had some signs. And we know how capable he is. But he's probably the weak link of these 8 on current form. But beyond that, there are 6 players who I think could win this tournament. This is a tough quarter. And I'm going to say it's the toughest, mostly because Luke Humphries is there, but also because the other players are pretty decent as well.
For me, I've got to go with the second quarter in terms of looking at the name power and what players have achieved recently. You've got 6 former major winners in that group of 8 players, headlined by the 4th seed Gerwyn Price, who's been one of the top players this season without perhaps having the rewards to show for it so far. And you've also got Nathan Aspinall, the world match play champion, Rob Cross, a 2-time winner of this event, Dimitri van den Berg, another ex-match play champion. And then you've got the last 2 winners of the UK Open, last year's winner Danny Noppert, this year's winner Andrew Gilding. Throw in Ryan Searle, he's a former major finalist less than 12 months ago, and I guess the only outlier in that group is Keane Barry. But you look at his resume, 21 years old, we can still class him as a young prospect, and it was only last year he was reaching the semi-finals of the UK Open and he dismantled James Wade 10-4 with that 100 average in the quarterfinals. And this year he's made a couple of quarterfinals on the Euro Tour. He's beat Rob Cross in both of those events that he played in. Nearly got to a semi-final as well. But at the same time, we'll talk about the race to Minehead a bit more later. But Keane Barry, one of those players currently not in the field for the Players' Championship finals. So he's had his moments this year with those 2 quarterfinals on the Euro Tour, but it's probably not been as often as we might expect from someone that has shown so much potential in the past. But who knows? This could be the week. I'm saying it's the toughest quarter of the draw. Maybe this is the week that Keane Barry goes on a run, beats all of those players that I mentioned, or well, he's going to have to beat 3 of them to make the semi-finals, and gets to that last session on Sunday night. Aside from that quarter, you mentioned that the third quarter, that is a pretty tough one to pick through. The bottom quarter as well, you've got Michael van Gerwen, Ross Smith, the defending champion, Damon Heta, 2 other young prospects in there, Gian van Veen, Josh Rock, the recent Euro Tour winner, Riccardo Pietrexco, all in there. But if you're looking at just 4 first-round matches on their own in a quarter, then I think the top quarter is the most difficult to call who wins each game. You've got Dave Chisnall, the number 1 seed, the reward for that. Chris Dobey, the Masters champion. Then you've got Martin Schindler, Stephen Bunting, a rematch of the second round of the World Grand Prix only a few weeks ago. And we've all been talking about how well Stephen Bunting's been playing, but Martin Schindler got the better of him in that last meeting on a major stage. And you've also got, you mentioned Michael Smith against Raymond van Barneveld. At this current moment in time in both players' careers, you would be siding with Michael Smith. He is the world number 1, the world champion, but don't rule out Barney on his day. And we've seen it, if he can turn up and perform at the levels we know he can, he could be claiming another scalp there in Michael Smith. And then lastly in that quarter, Peter Wright and Gabriel Clemens, again another rematch from Leicester earlier this month. Peter Wright won that one pretty comfortably, but I wouldn't be looking at that game as Peter Wright being a massive favourite. And you throw in the German crowd as well. They're going to be heavily behind Clemens. They're going to want a German winner, and they could have 1, 2, possibly 3 winners in that first round.
Now, second question is our question of the week, sponsored by Condor Darts, and it involves our guest who you'll be hearing from in just a bit, and that is the defending champion Ross Smith. How far will Smudger go in defense of the European Championship this week?
Yes, first of all, shout out to our sponsors, Condor Darts. The poll on Twitter at the moment, just 4% of our listeners are going for Ross Smith to repeat what was the weekly Dartscast upset of the year and defend the title. 6% are going with Ross to make the final or the semi-finals, make that last session of action. The big majority, though, 70% of our listeners are saying that Ross is going to get to the quarterfinals or the last 16, and that leaves 20% saying that he's going to go out in the first round on Friday night. And we've got one of our listeners got in touch on Twitter, My Dark Coach, who says, I'm very sorry for Ross as I like him, but we have someone in our team who has something against Ross going for a deep run. My darts coach works with Ricardo Pietrexco, who is Ross's opponent in the first round. And I think a month or so ago, if that was the draw, you would have sided with Ross Smith, but you'd have still been wary of Ricardo because we've seen in the past he's knocked out a big name before. He beat Damon Heta in a last leg in Minehead last November. He was the 64th seed facing the number one seed. Damon Heta got the better of him on that occasion, but I think the run that we've just seen, and we spoke about it on the show last week, winning that Euro Tour title, beating the likes of Bunting, Van Gerwen, Wright, it's made everyone stand up and take even more notice of him. And on the other side, you've got Ross, who's a top 16 player, but it's actually Ricardo who goes into this tournament as the highest seed. That title propelling him to number 14, Ross coming in for that title defence at number 19. And we just spoke about the toughest sections of the draw for Ross to make that final day. He's going to have to beat Ricardo in the first round, then the winner of Michael van Gerwen, Madars Razma. You'd expect it to be MVG, but he has come unstuck in the first round a couple of times in this tournament in recent years. But it's going to be a tough route to the title for Ross. But we look at last year's run, and it got the televised performance of the year from the PDC, beat Joe Cullen, Dimitri van der Berg, Peter Wright, Chris Dobie, and then Michael Smith in that final. He averaged 95 to 101 for the whole week, and that showed us that the levels that Ross is capable of over a sustained period of time over those 3 or 4 days last year. And I wouldn't be surprised if he went and won it again, but I've got to say, I don't think he's going to go back-to-back in Dortmund. We saw Ross at the weekend hit some high levels again, the 9-darter, the comeback against Damon Heta in the final to win that Players' Championship. So his confidence is going to be high coming into this event, having just won that title. I do think he's going to beat Ricardo in a close first-round tie on Friday night, but I think he's going to come unstuck against Michael van Gerwen in the last 16. So I'm going to side with the majority of our listeners here. I'm going to say it will be a last 16 exit for Ross in his title defence at the European Championship this week.
Yeah, Ross Smith would never beat Michael van Gerwen at the European Championships. Well, this is in a way, this is an easy question. I could be wrong, but if you factor in there's 32 players, if they all had an equal chance of winning, it's a 1 in 32 chance. They don't all have an equal chance. Certainly Michael van Gerwen, Michael Smith, Dave Chisnall, Luke Humphreys have a better chance to win than some of the other players do in this field. But no one has a 1 in 2 chance, and therefore the safe answer is up to will he defend is no. And even if I thought he would, I still probably would say no, because it is the statistically correct answer. It's very unlikely that he will. But the chance that he will has definitely increased compared to where it was if you would ask me this a week ago. Look at this past weekend in the 4-player, or I shouldn't say weekend Saturday in the 4-Players Championship events. Across 16 matches, 10 of them, he averaged over a ton. 2 of his 3 losing averages that week were also above the century. And yeah, sure, he wasn't really pushed in many of those matches. And the ones he were I mentioned 2 of the 3 losing averages were over a ton. Most of the times he was pushed, other than maybe the semifinal and final that he won the title, were matches that he ended up losing. But you can only play against what is in front of you. And what was in front of him, he dominated. He played at that level that he played at for the first 2 sessions of last year's final. And that's why he put Michael Smith in the final in a position that he just could not get back into. And he did this pretty much across 4 days. And if he's playing at that level, if he brings that level into Dortmund, he absolutely has a chance. He's beaten Michael van Gerwen before on debut in 2019. Also this year, he had his best ever run just about a couple months ago in a Euro Tour, making it to his first semifinal ever at a Euro Tour event. Yes, he's won the European Championships, but at the actual Euro Tour events, he had never been past the quarterfinals of any Euro Tour. Now he's had that semifinal under his belt, which means big stage matches where recently he's been able to win. Right now, he's playing at the best level he's played at in quite some time. And that means he's a better chance than I would have said if you had asked me this a week ago. But even still, the answer is no. I mean, Ricardo Pietreczko, that in one way, that's a favorable first-round tie because we haven't seen Pietreczko on the big stage in a major event before. But on the other hand, he's coming in with confidence. He made the semifinals of the third Players' Championship event this past week, and he won the most recent Euro Tour. That's a difficult first-round tie. And even though Ross Smith has beaten Michael van Gerwen before in the European Championships, when Michael van Gerwen threw a 105 at him, it's still a tough second-round match, especially since that would be best of 19 compared to the best out of 11 that he beat him out for 4 years ago. He has the chance. He's definitely playing better now than he has been for much of this year. But even still, I'm going to say no, and I'm going to agree with you. Last 16 is where he goes out. But I think he's going to be playing well. And if he's playing well, he definitely can go further.
Well, those are our predictions. Let's hear it from the man himself. Here's our chat with the reigning and defending European champion, Ross Smith. I'm pleased to say we're joined by the reigning and defending European champion, Ross Smith. Thanks for the time, Ross. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm feeling really good, thank you. All good. How are you doing yourself? All right?
Doing well, thank you. And we're talking just before you make the trip to Dortmund, the scene where you won your first major title 12 months ago. You're going back as the defending champion. So how are you feeling just a few days away now from the tournament getting underway?
Yeah, I'm feeling really good, to be fair. Where I've had a good week in Barnsley, which has obviously really helped, and so yeah, I'm feeling good and feeling positive, and yeah, looking forward to it.
And the last time we had you on the show, it was just a matter of days after you won that title, and you said to us it was back to normality straight away, doing the school run, taking the kids trick-or-treating for Halloween as well. So has life changed much since you won that title when you look back at those last 12 months now?
No, the day-to-day stuff still the same, I suppose. Still being dad and stuff like that. I've got my little lad Archie at the moment, and he's on half term, so I'm trying to keep him entertained during the day and stuff, and trying to get on the practice board a little bit in the evening. So, but yeah, still juggling everything around.
Good to hear. Well, we did see your local football club, Dover Athletic. They've invited you as a guest to some of their games. You've taken the trophy with you. Have you got to do any other cool things like that in the last year?
I'm just trying to think, to be fair. I went up, like I say, went to Dover. That was really good, and I've done a few, exhibitions here and there. Like I went to Denmark and places like that. So I've seen some new places, I suppose. But I love being up at Dover. Obviously, it's my hometown, and I do support the locals. So it was a privilege to go there.
One thing that we have seen you do is throw 180s on demand. The video at the Crystal Palace training ground that you did with the PDC, I managed to hit a 180 last week, and I probably won't hit another one for the rest of the year now. So what is it like being able to throw the perfect score as easily as that?
It comes quite natural. I think I'm just maybe lucky at that. I don't know. It's just I don't really think about it, to be fair. I feel like the way my darts lie, and if that first one goes in, I'm pretty confident the next two will follow. It's just a sort of like a natural thing, I suppose. But yeah, I'm obviously I like hitting the 180s, and they're going well. So yeah.
Yeah, we certainly saw that towards the back end of last year as well. A few records that you set, the most 180s in a Grand Slam group game, and then that thriller at Ali Pali with Dirk van Dijvenbode, you hit 31 between you. I guess coming into this year, how are you feeling about your chances of more success coming your way?
Yeah, obviously, again, I'm pleased with how I'm going into the European Championships. Obviously, winning the Players' Champs on the floor last week, that's given me a lot of confidence at the right time. I wasn't too happy with my performances, obviously, at the Grand Prix and the World Match Play. I feel like I want to start making these later stages, which I've said before. In these majors, I feel like that's my next step. Really, is to be starting to make the quarterfinals minimum and semi-finals, final, whatever, or winning. I feel like I need to start pushing harder now. So yeah, that's the aim. And again, I'm just working hard at trying to do that. But I know that the field's so good now, and it's very unlikely you get players dominating anymore. You know, you're seeing it more and more in the game, and not just in darts, in most sports in general now. I think it's difficult to, you know, maybe win 2 or 3 majors a year, or even, you know, 2, well, let alone 2 or 3. One's difficult enough. So, yeah, it's a long career ahead, hopefully. Fingers crossed that if I keep working at it, and, yeah, hopefully things will start paying off.
Definitely. Well, one change that we have seen since we last spoke, it was just before the Masters, it was announced that you'd changed dart manufacturer, you joined up with Unicorn. How did that move come about?
That move just come about. Obviously, I was having it just come about, really. You know, looking for a new manufacturer, and Unicorn were there. They come with me with a great deal of what I wanted with darts equipment and stuff like that, and you know, the design was exactly what I wanted, and yeah, I can't thank them enough. You know, they've been absolutely superb and been everything that I've wanted from a manufacturer. They've been brilliant.
We saw your new darts on stage a few months after that. Did you make many changes from your old setup at all, or was it just fine-tuning what you already had?
Yeah, it was just fine-tuning. I changed a few grooves, etc., like that. Obviously, the colours are a massive difference, and the coating is a different. Obviously, it creates a different grip as well. So yeah, there's a few. I suppose if you look at the darts, there's I suppose the grip doesn't look too different, but if you go into detail, there's quite a lot of difference there. So yeah, but I love them, and I'm really pleased with them. But again, I can't thank Unicorn enough for everything they're doing for me. They've been superb.
And we saw you at the Unicorn launch a few weeks ago, so can we expect to see your new darts being available to buy soon as well?
Yeah, I've been told they're coming out pretty soon. I believe hopefully in the next week or 2. So fingers crossed that they'll come out and it'll all go really well on the sales side, which I'm sure it will. You know, I've had a lot of people message me and always asking me when they're coming out. So yeah, obviously these things don't happen overnight. But yeah, they look all ready to go, and I'm really, really pleased with them. They look smart. So yeah, fantastic.
Excellent. Well, after the Masters, we saw the Premier League lineup that was announced. Your name was being touted quite a lot by pundits and fans to be in that lineup. Leaving Milton Keynes that weekend, how are you feeling about your chances as a major winner of getting in, or did you think you maybe needed a deeper run at the Masters to get it over the line?
It was a tough one, really. It was tough to take. I'm not going to lie. I thought I had a chance. I thought it was one of them. I deserved it, but also probably didn't deserve it. It was a bit of a toss-up. So, you know, I think I was like one of 4 or 5, I can't remember what it is now, one of 4 or 5 people who won a major who was actually in the Premier League, and there was players who didn't. So, but I understand as well, it's a business, and you know, I just need to knuckle down now, and I have forgotten all about that now. I just want to knuckle down and concentrate on the next tournaments, and yeah, hopefully it will come one day.
Let's hope so. Well, from there it was back to the Pro Tours, and I guess for you, some of the dates that you were looking at first of all as the European champion were those Euro Tour qualifiers, and you ended up winning through 8 of them. Did you feel any added pressure going into those qualifiers, knowing that you had to win to put money on the board to get back into the European Championship?
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. Again, something I'm not going to lie about there. That's you know, I went in at the start of the year thinking, you know, let's hit the ground running with it, because of, you know, the thought of not going back there and trying to defend my title was, you know, it'd be a bit humiliating, really. It'd be a bit of an embarrassment. So yeah, the pressure was on straight away from the start of the year. But like I say, I feel like I've really conducted myself well in them qualifiers, and like I say, got through 8 of them, and I think I ended up seeded in a few of them. I think there's only one out of the 13, 1 or 2 absolute max that I missed out on. So I think it's been successful in qualifying for them. Maybe not the results of whilst I've been there have not always gone my way, but yeah, I'm proud of myself to, you know, go through the hard way, let's say. So yeah, all good. Yeah,
a lot of hard work behind the scenes to get back into that field, and as you say there, ended up playing in 11 of the 13 Euro Tours, some of them as a seed, and I think the most you'd played in before in a year was 7. So how much have you benefited from that extra stage time this year?
Yeah, I've benefited a lot, to be fair. It's you know, it's tough, and yeah, it all helps towards the rankings on the Pro Tour as well. I think it's massive. The Euro Tours is absolutely huge with the prize money for the rankings compared to the Players' Championships. You get through to the last 16 when you're a seeded player. You play one game and it's the same money as getting the semi-finals of a Players' Champ. So it's massive on the rankings, and I feel like you need to be there pretty much in most of them to be even standing a chance of getting into qualifying for the majors on TV as well. So I think them Euro Tours are the most important on the tour, to be fair.
And you did set a new personal best in a single Euro Tour this year, getting to that semi-final. As far as the TV events, you've had a lot of close games that haven't gone your way. We mentioned the Worlds with Dirk, also the UK Open, the match play being edged out by just one or two legs. Do you feel like you're not far away from that turning in your favour and you're going to go on a deep run again?
Yeah, I do. I really do, because I feel like my performances are pretty decent. It's just literally just fine tuning it and having a bit of luck go your way. Again, the standard's so high, and I just feel like you've only got to look at previous winners of majors and stuff like that, and Players' Championships and Euro Tours. Obviously I've got Peach too. Ricardo, he's a lovely guy. I've got him obviously defending my title, and he goes up and wins the last Euro Tour of the year just out of nowhere. I won the European Championships out of nowhere. Gilding won the UK Open, and Danny Noppert won the UK Open for the first time. So it's just completely up in the air now, and but that just shows the credit to all the players how good they are nowadays.
Can't argue with that, and we're enjoying watching it as well. And we'll get back to the tour in a moment, but I've got to mention your trip that you had in the summer to America with Stephen Bunting and Danny Baggish. You three were entertaining us on social media during that quiet time in the season. First of all, how did that trip with you three come together in the first place?
It come together. I've put a thing on social media asking about the the Las Vegas Darts Open, and Danny rang me up and literally just invited me out to America for 2 weeks to do exhibitions instead. Not instead, but just offered me to go out and do them. And it was when he told me where and going over there to all these different states he was going to, and New York's always the place that I wanted to go as well, and Philadelphia. It was incredible. It was not just about the darts. It was also about the sightseeing and things like that, and I'll be forever grateful for that. It was sort of like a once in a lifetime trip, and to do that with friends as well, like Stephen and Danny, it was absolutely fantastic, and something I'd love to do again, and I'll be forever grateful.
Yeah, it looked like a good time, and some of the highlights that we saw, Stephen singing Barbie Girl in the taxi next to you. We also had Danny Baggish telling the restaurant it was your birthday, getting the staff to sing to you. Any other memorable moments that you can share with us that we didn't get to see?
Oh yeah, there was loads. It all started obviously with Danny doing the birthday thing on the first day. I was absolutely knackered, and it caught me a cracker. And then the next day or the day after, we'd done it to Stephen in New York, in the middle of New York, and that was good fun as well. And it was just loads and loads of banter. To be honest, most of the stuff that we didn't plan to put for it to go like this on social media. It's quite strange, really. So was just messing around, bored in the car or something whilst travelling, and I'd do a stupid video or something, and I'd send it to his manager Mark or my manager, and not actually knowing us putting it on social media at the time. So, it was just one of them. But I'm glad everyone enjoyed it, and it was good fun.
Good times. Well, let's get back to the serious business before we let you go, and we should touch on your last event on tour only a few days ago, winning that Players' Championship, a 9-darter, and then coming from 6-3 down in the final to beat Damon Heta. And as far as a confidence booster for this week, they don't get much better than that, do they?
No, definitely. The last tournament you play in and you win it, so going into the next one, you're always going to feel a lot of confidence and stuff. So yeah, it couldn't have come at a better time. And but I also, I keep my feet on the ground. I know that's gone now, and I've got to concentrate on Friday night against Ricardo. Again, he's a lovely guy, and obviously an absolutely fantastic player who's coming along on the scene big time now. Winning his first European Tour event. So again, no game's easy regardless. But I've just got to sort of take my confidence into that game and keep my feet on the ground at the same time.
Yes, again, we're definitely looking forward to watching you and Pikachu on Friday night. And lastly, a lot of darts to be thrown between now and Sunday night. We look at the roll of honour for this European Championship. Only Phil Taylor, Michael van Gerwen have defended the title. So what would it mean to you to join that shortlist and another shortlist, I guess, of multiple-time PDC major winners?
Oh, it'd be absolutely incredible. It'd be incredible to defend the title. But again, I won't go into looking into things like that. I just literally will concentrate on playing Ricardo first game, because of you give yourself a headache when you start looking deep into it and things. And again, the standard of darts is incredibly high, and it's difficult now, and you need a bit of luck along the way as well. But again, there's no reason why I can't do it. If other players have done it before, then there's no reason why I can't. But again, I just need to concentrate on my game and knuckle down, and you never know what'll happen.
We shall see. Well, Ross, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks very much for taking the time, and we wish you all the best, not just with this week, the defence of your title, but what else is to come in 2023 as well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks again to Ross for joining us now. Looking back at last week's action, the penultimate week of Pro Tour events for 2023 took place in Barnsley. We had titles for Gary Anderson, Ryan Joyce, Ross Smith, and fair to say a surprise package in Radek Sagansky. What were your main takeaways from the 4 events last week?
Just how good all 4 did, not just over the day they won, but over the entire week. And I think that's something that can easily get lost when you have a surprise winner like Radek Sagansky, when you have not a surprise winner like Ryan Joyce, but someone who you might not have tipped to win it. And I would say the form that he had been in for much of this year, Ross Smith was also a surprise winner. Gary Anderson was not. Gary Anderson, excluding Matthew Denon, is topping the Players' Championships. But you could make an argument the other 3 were surprise winners at varying degrees. But all 4 of them, I think, had very good weeks, even aside from winning the title. And I talked about Ross Smith already, so I'm not going to go into him again. But I want to talk about the other 3. Obviously, Gary Anderson's the easy one to talk about. He's now won 3 titles this year in the Players' Championship events, 5 finals, 6 semifinals, 10 quarterfinals, more than a third of the events he's made it to the quarterfinals in. And over the 18 matches he had across the 4 events this past week, he averaged over the ton in 10 of them. That's more than half over the ton. Granted, his season average is 99 and change, so it's not like even when he's just average, he's almost averaging a ton. But 10 of the 18 over a ton, including 4 consecutive en route to the title over 105, against players that you need to do that against. Keen Barry, Ross Smith, Gurin Price, Danny Noppert, back to back, all over 105. That's Gary Anderson at his best. And Gary Anderson really has been at his best in the Players' Championship events this year. It's the best we've seen from him in quite some time, since maybe when he was world champion, since maybe when he was really pushing Michael van Gerwen and was the only person pushing Van Gerwen. But I want to talk about the other 2 as well, because they also had good weeks. Ryan Joyce, all 7 of his matches en route to the title were above his seasonal average. People who beat him were no slouches. On the first day, it was Gezi Price, who he got revenge on in the final on the second day. On the third day, he went out to the eventual champion, Radek Sagansky. And on the final day, he might have gone out early, but the guy he went out to, Mickey Mansell, made it all the way to the semifinals. And only 1 match that he played over the course of the 4 days was more than 1.25 points below his seasonal average. And that was that loss to Radek Sagansky on day 3, who ended up going on to win the title. It was a week where Ryan Joyce lifted his game, and he'd already lifted his game quite a bit this year, making those 2 previous finals. He's getting better. He's getting more consistent. He's getting more dangerous. And considering he was already a danger, that's why he made 2 finals. It makes him someone to look out for in the coming tournaments. Yes, he's not in the European Championships, but he'll be in the Players' Championship finals. He'll be a threat to get through the qualifier for the Grand Slam. And I think he's a player to watch out for at the Worlds. But let's talk about that surprise of all surprises in Radek Sagansky. 14 matches across the week, 11 of the 14 were above his seasonal average, including 6 of the 7 en route to a title. And of the 3 times that he averaged below his seasonal average, he won 2 of them. One against Ryan Joyce, who I mentioned that he beat en route to the title, and the other against Dimitri Vandenberg. Yeah, he had luck in the first round en route to the title against Jacques Labre, when Labre missed a handful of match starts. But that happens. You need luck. And what did he do after that? Well, with a tough draw, with some tough players. I mean, the draw opened up at the end, but he made it open up. He lifted his game, and he won through after that struggle. And he played from being outside the World Championship spots, outside the Players' Championship final spots, to basically guarantee to both. It's not the champion we thought we would have had when the day started. Probably not the champion we thought when we saw who the semifinalists were. I would have said Ricardo Pietreczko was the most likely, but it wasn't. It was Radek Sagansky, and it was a deserved title, as it was for all 4 players this week.
Yeah, it was an interesting week to follow, and we joked about it off air. We had tipped Ryan Joyce to have a deep run in that last Euro Tour event to try and get into the European Championship, and he went out in the very first game in the tournament. So we were 1 week early with our tip for that one. But for me, there is only one place to start, and that is with Friday's action, Players' Championship 27, and one of the most surprising Pro Tour finals that we've ever seen. 2 players outside the world's top 64 in Radek Sagansky and Connor Scott, both appearing in their first senior finals in the PDC. And for the winner, Radek, this run to the title, it could have been over before it even got started. He survived those match starts against Jacques Labre in the first round in that last leg decider, but after that, grasped the opportunity with both hands. The second round against Dimitri Vandenberg, there was a key moment in that game, the 1-4-2 finish to go 4-1, and a double break-up, ends up winning that game 6-2. And the game against Johnny Clayton, it didn't get any easier in the last 32, got pegged back to 4-all. The last 2 legs, a 120 finish to break, and then he holds throw in 15 darts. And this is what we were seeing throughout the day from him, particularly in that semi-final as well. He would have gone in again as an underdog against that newest winner on the Euro Tour, Ricardo Pietreczko, but kicks off the final 76, 96, 67, 1-2-1 finishes to go 4-0 up, and he still has time for another 1-2-1 and a 108 in there. And I think it really was the finishing at key times that helped him out on that way to the title. And the final, 4-2 down, the key moment in that game for me, Connor sat on 36 to go a double break and 5-2 up. Sagansky takes out another 1-4-2 and then gets a 13 darter against throw, 4-all, very solid on throw, and at the end just manages to keep Connor at arm's length in those last 2 legs, both 17 darters, but it was enough to get the job done, and it was a 98 average in that final, which is a huge win. As you say, he's going to be in the World Championship, he's going to be in the Players' Championship finals, and this is someone that before last week looked like he was going to be missing out on both, and it would have come down to the qualifiers to get to Ali Pali, and probably would have needed to win 1 or 2 games at the World Championships to keep his tour card. But this title has given him a huge lift now, and same with Connor as well, someone that we've followed on this show for a long time. He was one of the guests on our very first episode, so we always like to keep track of how he's getting on, and I think going into that Friday, the run to the final, his spot at the World Championship, it was looking a little dicey. I think he might have been in that last spot, 32nd spot on that list of Pro Tour qualifiers, so he needed a big run, and okay, he fell short in the final, but still a big run for him, and that's going to get him that debut at the World Championship. It's going to get him to the Players' Championship finals, and again, his chances of keeping that tour card are looking a lot brighter too. And aside from that, I think I've got to mention as well, you mentioned him, Gary Anderson, some of the stuff that he was throwing in Barnsley was ludicrous. Take away this year's stats killer, Matthew Dennant, who's played 1 game, averaged 103.44. Gary Anderson tops the list of the Players' Championship averages, 99.51, which is over that amount of games is an incredible statistic, and he's over a point clear of the rest of the field. Won that first event of the week last week, had the 9 darter, loads of 100+ averages in there, a couple more quarterfinals. I think the only surprise really was on the Saturday, might have just ran out of steam there, that 91 average, and went out in the first round. But the way he's playing in these floor events, you are half expecting him to back it up in one of these major events. And you also look at next year, he is 13th on that current Pro Tour Order of Merit. If he stays in that top 16, it's looking very likely he's going to be seeded for some of these Euro tours. So maybe 2024 could be the year that we see Gary Anderson make a real statement on the Euro Tour again, appearing 9, 10, 11 of them. I know it's early days to call that, but it's an exciting prospect, that's for sure.
After the 4 events last week in Barnsley, there's just 2 Players' Championship events left, those being next week. And as things currently stand, 2 of the world's top 8 are not in the field for Minehead. Peter Wright, currently a few £1,000s back. The cutoff is 16,250 right now. He's at 13,500. Nathan Aspinall, a full £6,000 out of the last spot. Have they left themselves with too much to do with just 2 events to go?
Oh yeah, it's starting to look that way, isn't it? 2 events to go, and you look at the players that are currently in those last couple of spots for Minehead, 63rd and 64th. You've got Jurien van der Velde, Jermaine Watermina, both on £16,250, but there is a lot of big names currently outside that top 64, and Peter Wright, Nathan Aspinall, you 2 that mentioned there, are the 2 biggest, that's for sure, 2 top 8 players, and we've seen the prize fund has gone up this year for the Players' Championship events, so at the moment, as we go into those last 2 events, Peter Wright looking at a quarter-final to make up that gap. Nathan Aspinall looking at a final, but you've also got to factor in players above them are going to be picking up prize money as well. So the way I look at this is, have both players skipped too many events this year? I think they have. You look at Peter Wright, played the first 2 Players' Championships, then he skipped the next 10 during the Premier League season. And I think at the moment he's played in exactly half of them, 14 of the 28. And it's the same for Nathan Aspinall. He's played around about that amount of the events. And I think both of them have left themselves with a lot of work to do. And as far as Peter Wright, just looking at him briefly, I think last week he had a big chance to make up that ground. Got to the quarterfinals in one of the events. He was looking in good form that day, a 109 average, a 101 average, beat Dimitri van der Berg with another good average there to get to the quarterfinals and lost out to Richie Edhouse in that game. And from what we saw on the stream, it looked like he was changing his darts mid-game, which is never usually a good sign. But again, that could have been a missed opportunity, especially when you get to those latter rounds when the prize money really does start to jump. He's going to have to go through all those rounds again if he is going to make up that ground and get to Minehead. And Nathan Aspinall, probably more surprising that he's not in the field at the moment, given that he has won a major title this year. He did win the match play. Okay, that doesn't count towards these rankings, but you look at the averages, 6th on the Players' Championship averages, 96.76. And I think, like with Peter Wright, that the problem for Nathan Aspinall is that he's missed too many of these events. I think he skipped 8 between March and July, a lot of that during the Premier League season, 6 more during the late summer into September, and we don't know the reason why, but played in the first 2 Players' Championships last week and then pulled out of the next 2 after losing in the first round in the first 2 days. So it's left them with a lot of work to do, and both players, we don't need to say they've got quality. We know they do. We know that they could both go and win each of these Players' Championships. One could win the first one, the other could win the next one, and they're comfortably in the field. But I think there's going to be pressure on the pair of them in these last 2, whereas for a lot of the other top players, they've got the job done early doors. They are going to be in Minehead, and I guess in a selfish way, if those players draw a Peter Wright or a Nathan Aspinall, they can look at it and say, well, if I can beat them here, I'm going to stop them qualifying for the Players' Championship finals. That strengthens my chances when we get to that event. That's one less of the big boys to worry about. So I think it's a big week coming up for the pair of them, not just to get to the Players' Championship finals. You're also looking at that Pro Tour top 16 I mentioned a moment ago, Gary Anderson being in there. These 2 not in there at the moment. So, yeah, both need a big week next week. I don't think, for me, if I'm making a prediction, I don't think that both of them are going to make it. I think maybe one of them makes it, and I'll give the edge to Peter Wright just because he is a little bit closer. He needs a quarter-final minimum. Nathan Aspinall needs a final minimum. But if I had to give the edge to one of them, I will go with Peter Wright. But as I said, I don't think we're going to see both of these players in Minehead.
A little harsh saying that it's a missed opportunity, that match against Edhouse, when you look at what Edhouse had to do to win that match. The first leg that he won, then maybe the missed opportunity was the 3rd leg of that match. That went 21 darts. But after that, Edhouse's winning legs were 13, 16, 11, 14, and 15. The only 2 legs over that span that Peter Wright won were in 12 and 10 darts. That's what it took for Peter Wright in that match to win a leg, a 12-darter and a 10-darter. I think Ed House was just playing absolutely phenomenally at the right times that day, and that's why he made the semifinal that day. I do agree. I think Peter Wright, he's obviously playing a lot better. If he was playing at this level earlier in the year, he wouldn't have a problem. He's 58th in averages in the Players' Championship events as things currently stand, but he is miles above where he was earlier in the year. You look back even just a month and a half ago, consecutive matches 81, 82, 83, 80. Earlier on 75, 82, 84. He really had some really poor performances early in the year, and he skipped a lot of the Players' Championship events while the Premier League was going on, not playing any of them other than the first weekend. But he's now playing well, but he still has a lot to do. You mentioned he needs at least a quarterfinal, but he probably needs at least a semifinal. Because, if you look at what 16,250 pounds is, that's across 28 events. At the average prize money per event, if that goes up after 2 more events, it'll be just under 17.5. I think 17.5 is probably the fair cutoff or estimate of the cutoff. It might be 17,250. It might be a little low. It might be a little higher, especially if you have another day like Players' Championship 27, where the only champion in the semifinals is Ricardo Pacheco. That could happen, but 17.5 or 17.250 seems like the fair estimate. That means Peter Wright needs a semifinal to make up enough, or a pair of board titles, which on countback probably would get him in. That's a lot to ask. He's playing well enough right now, and he could go and win a title, but it's still asking a lot. Nathan Aspinall either needs, in essence, a semifinal and a quarterfinal, or a final to make up the difference, because he's at 10,250, and he's also skipped most of these. And it's weird that a player who is currently, excluding Matthew Dennett, 6th in averages, is that far out of it, but he's played in only 13 of them, and he's gone out first match in the last 4 that he's played in. Some of them he played all right in. He played okay against Christian Kist at the previous set of events. Went out. He played okay against Jermaine Watamena, but only won 1 leg, mid-90s average. But he's also had a lot of poor performances, and when he's had a chance to add money on, he's seen his game drop. He dropped down in the last 16 against Damon Hedda. That's where he did himself in. That was the previous weekend as well. But a chance to get another 1,000 pounds on his ranking, a chance to go further. And his average dropped from 99 against Golding to 85 against Damon Hedda. And couple in all those first round exits, he's left himself a lot to do. I'm going to say neither of them make it. Both could, but I'm going to say neither of them make it because they've left themselves so much. But I want to mention just 2 more players who are currently outside. Steve Beaton is 500 pounds back. Mervyn King, who had a phenomenal week. He's done absolutely nothing in season 2023 to date, but he had a very good week, winning his board a couple times, winning multiple matches every day. He's now up to 14,500. He's now just a board title out of that last spot. Those 2 players, Steve Beaton and Mervyn King, are ever presents. There's only 3 ever presents left, James Wade being the 3rd one. 2 of them are currently outside, but they have a chance to play in. They're right there now. King after a very good week, Beaton after a less than stellar week. That's another thing to look for. So 2 of the top 8, but 2 of the 3 ever presents still with work to do to get to Minehead.
And now move on to our next guest on this week's show. He is the author of the new darts book, Every Neet O Week, James Walton. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by the author of the new darts book, Every Neet O Week, James Walton. Thanks for the time, James. How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad. Very good. Yourself?
Doing good, thank you. And first of all, some of our listeners will be wondering what your link to darts is and why you've got you on the show, and it is all to do with your new book. So give us some insight into where the idea to write a story about darts came from.
I've had it for quite a while, because the main aspect of obviously of the story as well, along with darts, is that of social clubs and the community and those sort of areas that I kind of grew up in. And I guess the story really started from, when I used to go with my granddad to the working men's club and stuff and watch him play balls. But the reason why I went with darts is because the kind of change that darts has gone on over obviously the past few years especially. How it kind of started in pubs and and clubs, and then now it's kind of turned into this big this big massive sport where people are getting dressed up and walking out to theme music and walking out with page 3 models and all that sort of stuff. And I thought it kind of fitted really nice with the fact that as I said, where it started, pubs and clubs have kind of declined, and obviously and kind of been rooted in communities, and they've kind of gone, whereas darts has kind of started there and then turned into this big massive thing that's on like Sky Sports and all that sort of stuff, and people playing for like hundreds of thousands of pounds, sponsorships through the roof, household names. So for me that's kind of how I got into it, and just spending time in them and kind of seeing darts as a perfect sport to use to kind of tell my story.
Well, we'll come back to the new book later, but let's circle back to the beginning for you as a writer. Where did the inspiration come from to pursue a career in the industry?
It's probably, when I think back now, when I was a kid, I always enjoyed writing, but obviously you don't tend to think about it as, as something that you do for a living. But as I got a little bit older and left school with not really anything, no qualifications out like that, I'd always been into film as well, so that's kind of my first foray into writing was doing a media course at college, and then obviously getting to script writing, and then it kind of went on from there. I went to film school in Leeds and then lived up there for quite a few years, and then just started script writing. But then when lockdown happened, obviously you couldn't really go out and make anything, so I kind of started writing other things. For example, poetry and books and novels and what have you. So that kind of pushed me into what I'm doing now, really.
And last year we saw you release your first book, Burton, which was a collection of poems. And I'm always interested to hear about how this process works as well, because I've come from a newspaper background. I worked in them for 10 years. It's constant deadlines, a quick turnaround to get the stories out there. So for you, how long does it take from that initial idea to then have that physical copy of the book in your hand?
I'd probably say with this, like I say, I started doing, because I'd read poetry and, but when I started it was because, again, looking at something for film, it's, there's so many aspects to it. It's like you get the idea, you write it, then if you're going to shoot it, it's, finding the time, finding the money, finding the cast, finding the crew, then filming it, then editing it, then finding out what you're going to do with it after that. Whereas with the poetry, it was in the middle of lockdown, and I just thought, well, I can just write this, put it on Instagram or whatever if I want to, and then that's it, really. It's, you could just write it there and then have it posted 5 minutes later. So I think from probably when we were first, it would have been, March, it probably would have been a year later, from when lockdown first happened, up until it coming out, really. Considering all that was happening, it was a pretty short space of time, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. And let's go on to your new book then, Every Neet at Week, a dart story. In terms of your own experiences, exposure to the game, have you played much yourself in the past, watched it on TV? How far does your interest in darts go?
Mine kind of, more being a spectator of it than playing it. Yeah, I'm not really that good at darts. I did think, like they used to do, have a few pints and then see if I improved, but I found that I got worse after having a few drinks. So I kind of, knocked that on the head. But as I say, I'm always interested in sports like that. Same with snooker, it's something that it kind of, like you say, snooker now, it's not really like you had Hurricane Higgins and stuff like that, who were these kind of, these stars of the sport and something different and a maverick and all that type of thing. Whereas snooker's not really like that anymore. Whereas I think darts is going up to that now. It's got a lot bigger, a lot more money's been put into it. They're playing at massive places. So for me, it's always been more of a spectator thing to it, because I won't play it if I'm useless at something. Like even if I practice loads and I still don't get any better at it, I I just won't play it that much. Same with snooker. Like, I'm terrible at snooker, so I don't really play snooker that much. But yeah, mine's always been as a spectator and listening to people's stories. Back in when I first had the idea, like I say, it was always about the social clubs and the community and its people. And I kind of got darts as this idea, and then it must have been about a month later at a hotel that I used to work at in Wigan, where they used to have a lot of the darts players staying when they played the tournaments at Robin Park. And I was in the pub next door, and I actually got chatting to Peter Wright for a couple of hours during that night, and he was just talking about darts, how it's changed, and some of the stuff that he said as well. I actually popped into the book because he mentioned something. This pub that we was in, they had a dartboard, but there was a table in front of it with people like eating the tea, and he said he was like, you can't really go into a pub anymore and as much as you used to be able to and go and play a game of darts. Like you said, there's someone sat in front of it eating the fish and chips, and that's actually like something that I put into the book as well. And it was, like I said, chatting to him, I kind of got a bit more of an insight from an actual player of what it was like growing up, and I kind of just fitted that with my ideas and what I'd experienced, like with my granddad and stuff.
Excellent, and we won't give too much away about the story. It does follow a character called Jimmy Stott, his journey from working in a chip shop to becoming a potential darts world champion. So for our listeners, just give them a brief synopsis, if you like, of what they can expect in the book.
The best way I always say is kind of like you'd expect a lot of northern charm, a lot of nostalgia in there for me, especially a lot of trips to Blackpool in the past, which is obviously like the pinnacle of darts nowadays still anyway. Pontins, places like that, and yeah, just a lot of stuff which I guess people even my age and older will probably like to reminisce about how things used to be. Maybe when, I suppose the same with like football and stuff like that, how sport used to be, where it was a lot more community led. You go to football or rugby or whatever every week and you'd know everyone around you, and it was kind of like, it was same on your street, you knew your next door neighbour, people across the road. And yeah, I'd just say it's something that's, quite a nostalgic piece. And I think, like you say, if you're into stuff like that, I think it'll be a great thing. And obviously, if you're into darts as well, there's not too many, I guess, people that get to read stuff nowadays coming out about darts in a novel type form. Which I guess will be an interesting thing for people.
Yeah, that's very true. And one of the things that makes the book unique as well is that it is written in a local Wigan dialect. You mentioned yourself being from Wigan. I moved up here, up north a few months ago, so I'm starting to understand the words and phrases a bit more now. But why did you decide to go down that route of using the local dialect as opposed to, in quote marks, proper English?
Because that's the way that I write. Like I say, I started off script writing. That's the way that I write my scripts. That's the way that my characters talk. It started off as you always write what you know. And a lot of people get criticised, for saying that, you're English, but you can't even, speak your own language and stuff like that. But there's a lot of interesting things with English and British languages, pronunciation of words, different accents, the way that people spell certain things, and I think people need to look at that. And it's like, for me, I always think of like the Beats, like Jack Kerouac and stuff. They had a certain language, the way that they wrote, but obviously they're lauded for it, and of it changing writing and becoming this real, like, this Beats movement. But yeah, it's kind of, if you speak, like you say, not proper English, but there's a reason why, and you can tell, if someone's from Liverpool or Manchester or Stoke or Newcastle, or, like the south of London, you can tell a lot about them by the way that they talk. and the way that they say things, and I think it's very interesting, and I think people should kind of just give it a chance and really listen to it, because you'll find as well when people read stuff that they know it has this this charm, and they kind of know what people are talking about, and I think people, that's, for me, that's the way that I talk, so that's the way that I'll write.
Definitely. Well, I read the book earlier today and enjoyed it. I know a lot of our listeners are going to enjoy reading it as well. I've got down here, it's being released on November the 11th. People, they can pre-order a copy now. We'll put a link in the description of this podcast as well. But you've also got a launch event coming up in Wigan. So for any of our listeners that are local, tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so it's on Saturday, November the 11th at 11:30 till about 2:30 p.m. At the Waterstones in the Grand Arcade. So obviously it'll be being launched there. I'll be doing a bit of a signing and probably having a bit of a chat and reading some of the book as well, if anyone wants to pop down throughout the day.
Excellent. And looking ahead, I'm sure you'll already be thinking about your next project, your next book. Any ideas already in the works? Are you already working on something?
Yeah, I am actually. Keeping it quite sporty, but it'll probably be rugby league. I think it'll be my next one. Sort of set in the 80s for a lot of rugby league. Again, that's kind of been a pinnacle of the North, really, is rugby league. So I've got an idea for that. So that'll probably be the next one.
Very nice. Well, before then, plenty of time to promote your new book, Every Neet a Week, now available for pre-order, released on November 11th. As we said, we'll put the link in the description. James, thanks very much for taking the time, and good luck with the new book.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Thanks again to James for joining us. Now, continuing our look back at last week's action and over to North America, where we saw one of the big events of the year take place. It was the CDC Continental Cup, and Stowe Bunce, what a run he's on this year, winning the title, booking a debut in the Grand Slam next month as well. How excited should North Americans be about his emergence this year?
Well, it's impressive how he wins when it matters. We mentioned the weekend that he almost did a Bo Greaves, winning 3 events, and now he's won this event. But overall, he's statistically he's not the best player on tour, excluding Jules Van Dongen, who's only played a couple events. He's 5 points behind Alex Spellman, and he's the 5th best player in terms of averages. And yes, averages aren't everything, but they give you a guide over a long bit of time. But he finds a way to win. Yeah, he's 5 points behind Alex Spellman, but he's played Alex Spellman 5 times this year. And what has he done in those 5 matches? He's won. And 4 of those 5, he had a lower average. So despite the fact that statistically Spellman has been the better player, even head to head, Stowe Bunce won each of those matches. That's the impressive thing. He finds a way to get it done. I don't want to get out of hand quite yet, because we haven't seen him on the big PDC stage. It takes time playing against the best players. Jules Van Dongen has only recently started to find his feet, and right now he looks a world beater. Jules Van Dongen, he needs to find an extra 20,000 pounds over everyone he's chasing before the end of the year to get into the top 64. He's playing well enough. He could win a couple of matches at Ali Pali. He could win a few matches in the Players' Championship final and save his tour card. But when he first started on tour, he could barely win a leg, let alone win a match. It took time playing against the best and playing week in, week out, and learning how to play at that standard to eventually reach that standard. We don't know what Stowe Bunce has to offer yet. He could be a player who puts 10 points on his averages when he's playing against PDC professionals. He could be a player who is playing near his best already. I think it's more likely the previous, because if he's finding ways to win against better players when he goes against them in the CDC, like Spellman, like Leonard Gates, like Danny Lauby, players that he keeps beating whenever he plays this year, then that's a sign that he'll lift his game when he needs to against the PDC professionals. It might not be good enough to win right away at the Grand Slam. It's very likely he'll lose all 3 matches because right now he's probably he's very likely to be the weakest player in his group. We don't know who the qualifiers are quite yet, but that's the most likely scenario. But he's lifted his game against the best players he's faced in the CDC, and he's found ways to get over the line. That means that I think he has gears to go through, and we'll see whether he can find any already. It's unlikely because it takes time and experience. You look back at the beginning of the year, he wasn't the same player. Okay, he made a final the first event, but over the next 4 events, he won a combined total of 2 matches. But then once he got his feet together, he won those 3 consecutive titles. He made another final at the last weekend, and now he's won the CDC Continental Cup. I think he has room to grow, and I think that growth will come by playing in events like the Grand Slam. And if he goes to Q School, and then we'll see what he can do. But to be excited, I am excited, but I'm more excited to see what comes next.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. And keeping your feet on the ground, that's exactly what Stowe Bunce is doing as well. If you've listened to the interview that we had with him a little while ago, or any of the interviews that he's done recently, he does come across as someone that is quite level-headed, and he's not letting this success that he's had over the last few months get to his head. He's keeping pretty grounded with things. And just looking at it overall, we are seeing each year now new and emerging talent coming out of North America, some names that we've not heard of before. And for me personally, Stowe Bunce was a name that I'd not heard of before this year. I'm sure some of our American listeners would have heard of him before. He's been playing for a little while, but here in the UK, I hadn't come across him, and then goes on that tear, winning those 3 CDC Pro Tour events in a row, the first player to achieve that feat, and it's helped him qualify for Ali Pali, and he's kept the run going at the weekend, the Continental Cup, which is one of the flagship events on the CDC calendar. I must admit, I didn't catch as much of it as I'd have liked to, but from what I saw on the stream, the production, they did an excellent job. It is all available on YouTube. If you need your darts fix before the European Championship, then do go and give it a watch. And Stowe Bunce on the opening night, impressed with that 104 average. The Saturday, the final day of play, didn't quite hit those same heights, but thrown for the title, pulls out the 15 darter on throw, the 180, gives him a bit of breathing space, but Jason Brandon comes back, hits the 140 to leave 76. Stowe takes out the 82, 1 dart at tops for the title. So, as you say, we have seen in critical moments, he has got the game to get over the line, and I'm interested to see how Stowe takes to the bright lights, if you like, of the PDC stage in the Grand Slam, when he wears the colourful trousers, the shirts, similar to Peter Wright. He's certainly going to stand out, and we're going to see if he can get to those next levels, if he can throw those big averages that we've seen him do at times. If he can do that in the Grand Slam, in the World Championship, he could well do some damage. But at the same time, I think getting that adjustment right, we know the travelling over here to the UK, there's a lot that goes into it off the board, the preparation side of it, that Stowe want to make sure that he gets right to give him the best chance of succeeding. So I think darts fans from North America, like us over here, will have seen him play this year. We've been intrigued by him to see how he is going to get on in those major events. It is a big stepping stone going up against the world's best players in these big events. He is a new name, a new face to root for, and yeah, I think like a lot of people, we're just looking forward to seeing how he gets on and how he takes to that big stage.
Now we have a pair of listener questions to end this week's show, both from Alex Desch, definitely the best Alex involved in this week's show.
Oh, come on.
That's what happens when you lose the title of Darts Strava King. You become the second best Alex on the show. First question from Alex Desch is, what's your favorite practice routines?
Well, that would involve practicing. I think I mentioned on the show recently that I've finally got my board set up at home, so there are no excuses now. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, I've joined a new team, so really do need to start putting in a bit of time. And I've found in the past it does make a difference when you're playing more regularly. Your game does show signs of improvement. So for me, that's going from a 44, 45 average to a 47 average, but it is improvement. As far as favourite practice routines, there's 2 that I like to do. I'm sure a lot of our listeners will have played the 1-2-1 game. You might have 6 darts, you might have 9 darts to take out 1-2-1, and if you check it out, you move up to 1-2-2, 1-2-3, work your way up and so on. That's a good one to play. Probably better when you're playing with a group of people, 2, 3, 4 people. We often play that before our darts team plays. A little bit of practice time beforehand just to practice a few checkouts. And the other one, I've not played it in a while, but I know that Glenn Durrant is a big advocate of it, and it is the Invisible Man game. So you give yourself a certain amount of darts to finish a leg of 501, and if you do it, you win the leg. But if you don't, then the Invisible Man, who's your opponent, he wins the leg. So it's a good game. Is you can change the difficulty to match your own standards. So it could be, for example, elite players, you've got to check out 501 in 15 darts on throw, 12 against the throw. And if you want to make it easier, you just add 3 darts to each leg, and you could match it to the format of, say, your league. If you play first to 2 legs, first to 3 legs, or if you're playing in tournaments, a little longer format. I find that's a good game to put yourself under a little bit of pressure in practice, because you're trying to check out before the Invisible Man, and you're also practicing a bit of everything. You're doing your scoring, you're doing your set-up play, and if you get as far as you like to and get to the finishes, you're practicing your finishes and your doubles as well.
Yeah, I like the 1-2-1 game. I've usually played it as 81 because I wasn't good enough. But I think now I can probably play it as 1-2-1. I actually did up at the starting at 101, but maybe I should add 20 points to the starting total. Especially after, was it last week or the week before, I took out a 1-2-6 to win, which is I think it's my highest shot to win a match ever. So I'm not going to complain about that. Not quite a Luke Humphreys 138, but still very proud of that 126. But I like that game. The Visible Man game, I've also played. I usually set myself 24 dart, and I usually lose. If I'm playing well, I'll get a 18 darter in there and crush the Invisible Man, and then be on a double. And after 16 darts the next leg, and before I know it, I'm on double 4, and it's been 15 darts more. But I also like 301 is like one of my favorite practice games, because you get double the practice on doubles, and my doubles I'm either hitting every time or I cannot hit a double for 6 turns, and just to get more practice on doubles I think is important in practice, and just to feel comfortable when you get to a double at the back end of a leg, because you've been practicing them just to start the leg in your own practice routine. And then also in the US we play a lot of cricket, and I like a version of cricket where it's not just 20 through 15 in bowls, but you also have to get 3 in the same bed, as well as triples and doubles, 3 of each. 3 triples that you would have to get 3 doubles, and 3 times getting 3 in the same bed. So it helps also practice your grouping, and it's a good practice game for cricket, which we play a lot of in the US.
Very nice. And we've spoke about both of these players on the show, and Alex wants to know Peter Wright or Gary Anderson.
Yes. I guess it's a tough question, because there's a lot of different ways to interpret it. We're talking right now, I think you have to say Gary Anderson. Yeah, Peter Wright is getting back and playing fairly good darts again. But Gary Anderson is playing, at least in the Players' Championship events, near where he was when he was a double world champion. He hasn't fully brought that to the televised stage yet. And the Euro Tour stage, he's played a couple of those. But again, he hasn't played that many matches on TV this year. Now there's a bunch of televised events at the back end of the year. We might see the best of Gary Anderson come out in the last couple months. And Gary Anderson is definitely a player that needs to be considered a dark horse to win the world title. If the stamina is there, the way he's playing when we do see him play is at a world championship caliber level. Peter Wright is not currently playing there. If we're talking, overall, who's had the better career, that becomes more difficult. Peter Wright's had a phenomenal 5 years. Gary Anderson had a phenomenal decade before that. And is not to, undersell the 5 years previous to that for Peter Wright. But it was really the last 5 years that he's gone from a bridesmaid to a world champion, a double world champion. But I still think I give the nod to Gary Anderson for having a better career, but it is close. As far as who I like more, I'm not going to answer that question. I think if people have listened to this show over the past few years, you know the answer to that. And maybe there's other ways to interpret this question, but those are the ways I'll interpret it.
Yeah, that's an easy one for me. It's got to be Peter Wright. He's one of my favourite players, and I've said it before, I'll always be grateful for the day that he let me come round for a game of darts and an interview at his now former home in Mendham in East Anglia a few years ago now. And I was a fan of his before then, being local to me at the time in East Anglia. He's been a great thrill seeing his success over the last 5 or 6 years, and particularly the last 2 or 3 years, winning those 2 world titles, the match play as well, and being lucky to speak to him and get him on this show a lot of times as well. So, yeah, it's definitely Peter Wright in terms of my favourite. But looking at the current form, even I'll admit you're picking Gary Anderson. I think his resume as well, when you look at both players' careers, it stacks up better than Peter Wright. So I'd have Gary as a top 5 player all time. Peter Wright probably just sneaks into my top 10, but that's a bit of bias coming in there. But yeah, if I'm looking at the 2 careers, Gary Anderson gets the nod. But if I'm picking my favourite between the 2, I do like both players, but Peter Wright's going to win that one every day.
Anything else for this week?
Well, as always, we've got to say a few thank yous to our guests for joining us, to Ross and James for their time. Thank you to our sponsors, to Darts Corner, for their continued support. Dartscorner.co.uk, dartscorner.com. Go and check them out. They are the world's #1 online darts retailer. If you need a new dartboard or you fancy trying out some new darts, they are the place to go. Thanks also to Condor Darts for sponsoring our question of the week. Go and have your say on Twitter on the poll. Let us know your thoughts on that. Thanks to everyone for listening. We hope you enjoy the European Championship this weekend. It should be an entertaining 4 days of darts, and we'll be back next week to recap it all. So until then, only one thing to do, and that is to enjoy the darts.
Yes, indeed, and also enjoy the football as Middlesbrough held on to win 2-1 after giving up a late goal in stoppage time. But yep, we'll be back next week, as Alex said. Keep the questions coming, keep the suggestions coming. It's only 7 weeks until the World Championships, so there's a lot of darts to enjoy. Not as much time to hang tight during, because it's just a free-for-all with everything, one after another of these televised events, plus the last 2 Players' Championship events coming up. So a lot to talk about as we prepare for the cutoff for the World Championships. So just, keep them coming and enjoy the darts and hang tight and enjoy the hanging tight and hang the enjoying darts in however combination of words you can combine.